Good evening. My name is Anthony McKay and I'm currently studying for a postgraduate diploma in geospatial science through Massey University. This presentation was created for one of the papers. This may seem like a niche subject, but let me put it in these terms. We have a collection of images of Great Britain taken between 1952 and 1980. These are images of everything from historic buildings that no longer exist to mundane street scenes. Tens of thousands of images, all freely available. Unfortunately, there's no metadata and no index. Imagine how useful these images would be to historians who want to see these buildings as they once were, or people who remember these images being taken 60 years ago and would like to see these images again. But there's no metadata and there's no index. So how do these people find these images? The images I'm talking about were captured during the production of filmed television series. And the metadata does exist in the form of a website called A Guide to Avengerland. So without further ado, let us journey into Avengerland. In this presentation, I will be giving you a brief outline of how Python and other tools were used to map Avengerland, or how what looked like insurmountable problems were turned into exciting possibilities. For 30 years, I have been a researcher and custodian of A Guide to Avengerland, which is essentially a large database listing filming locations used in British filmed television series, made naturally enough in a place called Avengerland. What is a British filmed television series? And where is Avengerland? British filmed television series came out of the 1950s, when American television producers took advantage of a failing British film industry to make television series for the US market at discount prices. In the 1960s, the unions put an end to this, so British companies took over the making of these filmed television series. A commercial product which was designed to appeal to an audience both at home and abroad. During the 1960s and 70s, dozens of these series were produced, featuring stories of extraordinary heroes who would return week after week to battle creations of mad scientists, to expose foreign agents and to outwit criminal masterminds. The best remembered and most extreme example of this genre is The Avengers. Episodes of this series were played out against a fictionalised version of England, set sometime between the Edwardian era and the swinging 60s. A land populated by characters from Dickens and situated firmly in the mid-Atlantic. A comic strip world. The rationalisation behind the creation of this fictionalised landscape is explained by Brian Clemens, writer and producer of The Avengers.
My theory was that if you saw Steed and Emma waiting in a bus stop with other people, they would look as though they were in fancy dress or they in a pantomime. We placed them in our own specially created world.
But Avengerland is also a real geographic area, a result of the physical location of the British film studios. Early British film studios were built in and around London. These studios were constantly battling thick fogs which would seep into the studio buildings. In the 1930s, newer, bigger studios were constructed outside the so-called fog zone, on the doorstep of the statutory green belt around London, a preserved historic landscape. It is this distinctive area to the northeast of London that became the tangible location of Avengerland. A demand by film and television researchers, fans of the series and local historians for data on this area led to the birth of a guide to Avengerland. The published version of this guide started as a few photocopied sheets. As more research was done over the years, this grew into a pamphlet, then a booklet. All this data was stored as text across many word processor files. What data are we talking about? This consists of information about the locations themselves and the series that were filmed there. A dozen different fields per entry. But this data is currently stored as appallingly bloated hypertext, inconsistent, incomprehensible and confusing, spread across 62 files. The purpose of this project was to scrub the current hypertext, extract the data and for the first time add interactive maps to the guide. I set out to find the right tools to achieve these goals. Python to scrub the hypertext and extract the data. ArcGIS for manipulating spatial data. Excel for storing and editing spreadsheets, and Google My Maps for geocoding and publication. It did not take too long to condense the data into 2 Excel spreadsheets. Data were then easily uploaded to create interactive maps in Google My Maps. Here is an example of such a map using data from the UFO television series. So here is the My Map. The data for this My Map was uploaded as 2 individual Excel files. This is because the maximum number of categories per layer for My Maps is 20. This is inconvenient because the average filming block for television series of this period is 26 episodes. This would mean that seasons or filming blocks have to be split in order to fit these constraints. If you pull down the drop down menu, you can see each one of these grey duplicates of the name is a location. Click on one of these and it takes you to the location on the map. Here on the left are the individual fields that were entered as the Excel database, including a link to the original data in the Avengerland site. Photographs were uploaded to Google's server, and that's where they're stored. For this particular location, we have 2 photographs from the episode, plus a link to a YouTube video that shows the original footage taken for the episode, which is quite nice. So we can compare the original footage with how it appeared on the screen. We can also get the data by clicking on the individual pins, and the images appear on the left hand side. We have the usual problem with a Google map of all this advertised data, all these extra pins and distractions masking the data that we do want to see. Having installed all the data, we can now view it on Google's Google Earth interface using this simple link. So here we are in Google Earth. So we double click on a location and a pop-up comes up and we zoom to the location. Google Earth gives us access to the original photographs that we had, But I'll make a note that that link to Avengerland no longer works. We can look at the location in 3D, which is also a very useful location spotting tool. Let's have a look at this location. Once more, we've got access to the images and the videos. Now, this location has been used in films and televisions since 1935. So it's quite a distinctive, popular location. People often visit it. But if you look at Street View, another feature of Google Earth, put the man down. We can now see that the building is derelict, and probably by now it's been demolished. As you saw, images and links can be uploaded to Google My Maps, but there are limitations. 10 layers per map, 20 categories per layer, to a maximum of 10,000 points. But now data can be exported in a KMZ file and used in ArcGIS to make feature layers and web maps. Different My Maps layers can be combined to a single web map. Here is an example. To create this web map, I used 4 sets of My Maps KMZ files. The Zoo Gang, UFO, The Prisoner, and H.G. Wells' Invisible Man. This is just a legend. Clicking these links doesn't do anything. So you have to click on a point to get this pop-up to appear. This title card was added using ArcGIS Pro. All the data here comes from the KMZ file. The KMZ files included the link to the Avengerland site, but that didn't work in this section, so I scraped it out into a separate field. The images, they came with the KMZ file. This is a link to the image stored on the Google site. So we've got access to all the images, and the links to the YouTube videos also come through in this interface. As with all Esri web maps, they can be ported over into applications. So for this story map interface, I've added the basic web map interface. Got the legend for the 4 series. Again, it's not clickable. We've got the layers that we can turn off and on. So now we're just looking at locations from The Prisoner. If I click on this group of overlapping locations, I've got the opportunity to open up all the locations, or just the nearest one to start off with. So these are all Camber Sands, Folkestone locations for The Prisoner. There's the Avengerland link that works. So that's quite a nice interface. Okay. We can also use the same web map data to create web apps using Esri's web app templates. So here's the dashboard template using the same data. So here we have the same data using the Esri dashboard interface. Now we've got the ability to filter out individual series, individual episodes and individual locations. A much nicer interface. We have an Avengerland link that works. The pictures are still stored back at Google, so again that's quite useful. Set. And select another series, another episode, another location. This gives an insight into the possibilities of using the data from the Avengerland site. Ideally, I'd like to see more ability to select and filter, to do queries such as finding all the locations used by one director, or all the locations used in one particular year. All these platforms had their own benefits. I was surprised at how useful MyMaps was. The ability to import and export files was very useful to me. Google Earth used the data created in MyMaps and presented it using a very professional looking interface, plus it had the 3D and Street View ability. All the data could be exported into Esri products, and that gives me a wealth of opportunity to tailor the interface and extract all the information I want out of the data and to disseminate it. So what have I achieved during this project? I have been introduced to a number of platforms and have experimented with tools to make the most of my data within these platforms. The data was turned into spreadsheets from which maps were easy to produce. Step by step, using different tools at each stage. The results were much better than expected, so I would encourage you to explore the potential of different tools, to take a few steps of your own and turn your problems into possibilities. Thank you.